The hostess stopped me with a polite smile and one small sentence that changed everything. "I'm sorry, sir. You're not on the list." Through the glass behind her I could see my grandson, 8 years old today, standing on a chair near a table full of gifts, balloons brushing the ceiling, 80 people laughing like they all belonged there, all except me. I want to pause right here and say something. If this moment already feels familiar to you, if you've ever felt invisible in a place you thought was home, I want you to stay with me. And if you feel comfortable, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read them all. This isn't just a story. It's a conversation. Hello, everyone. My name is Gregory Crawford. I'm 65 years old. I'm a retired firefighter, widowed, and I've lived in the same small house on Elm Avenue for more than 3 decades. I raised my daughter alone after cancer took my wife too early. Everything I did in my life, I did for family. I believed that was enough. That night, I was standing in the marble entryway of Riverside Grill, a place I'd been coming to for over 20 years. I celebrated my daughter Kimberly's college acceptance here, her engagement, the night she told me she was pregnant with Ethan. Back then, these walls felt warm, familiar, like they remembered me. Now they felt cold. I was wearing my best navy polo, the one Kimberly once told me made me look distinguished. Worn khakis, clean shoes, nothing fancy, but I came with pride. In my pocket was a small brass compass I'd polished the night before. Engraved on the back were the words, "Always find your way home." I'd planned to give it to Ethan before dinner. Watch his face light up. That was the moment I'd been holding onto all week. The hostess checked her clipboard again, like maybe my name would magically appear. "The party is at capacity, 80 guests," she said softly, "and your name isn't here." "I'm Ethan's grandfather," I told her. "I paid for the party. $6,500, 2 weeks ago." Her smile faltered just a little. She looked toward the private room and said she'd get my daughter. I watched Kimberly stand up from the head table. Her husband Merrick rose with her, calm as ever. Wine glass placed down carefully. They walked toward me while laughter spilled out behind them. My grandson was being guided toward the cake, his back to the door. He hadn't seen me yet. "Dad," Kimberly said, eyes already wet, "this is awkward." That was the word she chose. I told her the check had cleared. I asked why I wasn't invited. She twisted her hands and finally said it. "Fire code, guest limits. People from Merrick's firm, people from the club." And somehow, the one person who didn't make the cut was the man who paid for everything. Merrick put a hand on her shoulder and said, "This party is about the children." I understood in that moment exactly who didn't fit. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just told them I hoped the money made the night everything they wanted, because that was all I had left to give. Then I turned around and walked out. I didn't know yet that this was the night everything would change. I didn't know who would make the next phone call, or what truth would come out, or how far the damage already went. All I knew was this. For the first time in my life, I was standing outside a locked door, and the people inside had decided I no longer belonged. If you've ever been there, don't go anywhere. This story isn't finished yet. I sat in my truck for a moment before I turned the key. The engine didn't start right away. It never does when my hands are shaking. The old Ford and I have been together 23 years. It knows when something's wrong. Families kept walking past me toward the restaurant, mothers fixing collars, fathers laughing too loud, kids tugging balloons. Saturday night normal. The kind of night I thought I was about to have. I pulled out of the lot slowly and drove home with the windows down, even though the air was heavy. I needed to breathe. I needed to feel something real. When I pulled into my driveway on Elm Avenue, the house looked the same as it always had. Small, quiet, porch light waiting. Margaret used to say it looked like the house itself was happy to see me come home. That night it just looked tired. Inside, I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't make dinner. I stood in the kitchen and stared at the refrigerator. Photos held up by old fire truck magnets. Me and Ethan holding a fish last summer. Kimberly in her graduation gown, smiling so big it made all those double shifts worth it. Margaret before she got sick, before everything changed. I slid down into the chair at the table and finally let myself cry. Not loud, not dramatic, just the kind of crying that leaks out when you've been holding it in for years. The kind that comes when you realize you've been shrinking yourself so others can stand taller. Margaret's voice came back to me then, clear as if she was standing right there. The night before she passed, when the pain meds gave her one last stretch of clarity. "Don't let Kimberly feel alone, Greg," she said. "Promise me." I promised, and I kept it. I worked 3 jobs. Sold my father's vintage motorcycle to help pay for Kimberly's wedding. Showed up whenever I was allowed. Bit my tongue when things hurt. Gave money when it was asked for. Gave time when it wasn't. And tonight, after all of that, I was erased. My phone buzzed on the table. Kimberly's name lit up the screen. Then again. Then a number I didn't recognize. I watched it vibrate until it stopped. Something inside my chest shifted. Not anger, something quieter, firmer. She always does, I thought. She always calls when she's scared she's gone too far. And I always make it okay. That night I didn't. I picked up the phone and called the one person who'd known me longer than my daughter had been alive. "Greg," Frank answered on the second ring. "What's wrong?" "They didn't let me into Ethan's birthday," I said. My voice surprised me, steady, flat. "I paid for it, and they locked me out." There was silence on the line. Then Frank said, "Where are you?" "At home." "Good, stay there." That was Frank, 30 years on the firehouse together. He could hear a collapse before it happened. After I hung up, I made another call, then another. Each one felt heavier and lighter at the same time. Like I was finally putting something down I'd been carrying too long. I wasn't doing this out of revenge. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was done disappearing. If you're watching this and you've ever been the one who always forgives, always gives, always comes last, I want you to stay with me. What happened next changed everything. And it didn't start with yelling or punishment. It started with boundaries. The next morning the house felt heavier than usual. Not sad exactly. Just quiet in a way that makes every sound louder. The ticking clock. The hum of the refrigerator. The creak of the floor when I walked down the hallway. Sounds you don't notice when you feel like you belong somewhere. I poured myself coffee and let it go cold on the table. I kept seeing the same image over and over. Ethan near the cake table, his back turned. Someone guiding him away before he could see me through the glass. That part hurt worse than the hostess, worse than Merrick's calm voice, worse than Kimberly not meeting my eyes. I wandered into the garage, the one place that had always been mine. The smell of sawdust and old oil settled my breathing. My workbench sat where it always had, scarred and steady. I built it with my father when I was 12. He believed in teaching boys to make things with their hands, said it gave you pride no one could take. I opened the drawer where I keep sandpaper and spare screws. Something was folded underneath. Ethan's drawing. Crayon on construction paper. Stick figures standing by a pond. One taller wearing a firefighter's helmet. One smaller holding a fishing pole. Above us, written in shaky letters, were the words, "My hero Grandpa Gregory." My hand started shaking again. I realized then why it was hidden. Kimberly had brought that drawing over months ago, smiling like it meant everything. A week later, she mentioned Merrick made Ethan take it down. Said it didn't match the decor. I hadn't pushed back. I never did, I just adjusted, like always. An 8-year-old had learned to hide his love so it wouldn't get thrown away. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about one party, it was a slow erasure, Thanksgiving forgotten, visits shortened, schedules suddenly full, every little thing brushed off as coincidence. I told myself I was being patient, supportive, understanding, but patience without respect turns into permission. My phone buzzed again, more missed calls, Kimberly, unknown numbers. I didn't listen to the voicemails. Not yet. I wasn't ready to hear excuses. I needed to be clear in myself before I heard anyone else. I sat on the stool in the garage and held that drawing like it was something fragile. Because it was. It was proof that Ethan still saw me, still loved me, and proof that someone was teaching him that loving me was something to be careful about. Out loud to no one I said, "No more." That was the moment the decision became real. Not about money, not about pride, about protecting a child from learning that love disappears when it's inconvenient. If you're still with me, I want you to type one word in the comments, just one. Home. Not for me, for you. Because everyone deserves a place where they don't have to hide who they love. I didn't know yet that someone from inside that restaurant had seen everything. That the truth was already on its way to my front door. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what was coming next. By noon, the phone finally stopped buzzing. Not because anyone had given up, but because word travels faster than people think. Especially when someone crosses a line they shouldn't have. Frank showed up first. He didn't knock. He never does. Just opened the door and walked in like he'd done 1,000 times before. His wife Linda followed with a foil-covered pan tucked under her arm like it was a shield. "Eat," she said, setting it down on the counter. "You can fall apart later." I tried to joke. It didn't land. Frank looked at me for a long moment, then nodded toward the chair. "Tell me everything." So I did. The door, the list, the check. The way Merrick said this party is about the children, like I wasn't family at all. I didn't raise my voice, didn't dramatize it. I just told the truth. Linda's face tightened with every word. Frank leaned forward, elbows on his knees, jaw set the way it used to get right before a bad call. "Greg," he said finally, "you remember when I lost my job, when I didn't know how I was gonna keep my house?" I nodded. "You showed up with groceries, helped me find work, never made me feel small." His voice cracked. "You don't deserve this." That hit harder than anything else had. A knock came at the screen door. Mrs. Patterson from next door stood there, hands on her hips, eyes sharp as ever at 78. She'd seen Frank's car. "I heard," she said, "no question. And I just want you to know something." She pointed at my chest. "You are a good man. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise, especially not family who forgot where they came from." After they left, I sat alone again, but it was different now. The house didn't feel empty. It felt steady, like it was holding me up instead of echoing. That's when I made the calls. Not angry calls, clear ones. First to my financial advisor. I told him to stop the remaining payment and lock down Ethan's education fund. Not to punish my daughter, to protect my grandson. Love doesn't mean access to everything. It means responsibility. Then I called the restaurant. Carlos answered. He'd been there for years. He remembered my wife, remembered me sitting at the bar during chemo nights when I couldn't go home yet. "I'm not paying the rest," I told him. "You can keep the deposit." He didn't argue. He just sighed and said, "That's fair." Then quietly added, "I'm sorry they did this to you." When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not relief. Not victory. Peace. I wasn't cutting anyone off. I wasn't burning bridges. I was simply stepping back onto solid ground and refusing to be pushed off again. If you're still here, stay with me. because what happened next didn't come from my daughter or my son-in-law. It came from someone I never expected to hear from at all. It was just after 9 that night when the knock came. I wasn't expecting anyone. The porch light threw a long shadow across the living room, and for a second I considered not answering. But something told me this wasn't a call I could ignore. When I opened the door, I froze. Vanessa, Merrick's mother. In 5 years of my daughter's marriage, she'd been inside my house exactly twice. Both times polite, distant, eyes that measured everything. Tonight she looked unsettled. "May I come in, Gregory?" she asked. No edge, no authority, just a question. I stepped aside. She sat on the edge of the couch, clutching her handbag like it was keeping her upright. She didn't comment on the furniture or the house this time. She went straight to the point. "What happened tonight was wrong," she said, "and I need you to know I didn't know you weren't invited." I waited. Years in the firehouse taught me silence makes people tell the truth faster than shouting ever does. "I saw you at the door," she continued. "I asked Kimberly why you were leaving. She told me you weren't feeling well." Her voice tightened. "Then I saw the check in her purse, $6,500. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and turned it toward me. A message thread between Kimberly and Merrick. Plans to cap the guest list. Messages about how my house was embarrassing, about limiting Ethan's exposure to lower expectations, about how I would get over it like always. I didn't react. I just handed the phone back. Vanessa swallowed hard. "Merrick did this to his own grandfather," she said. "Cut him off completely. Said the old man didn't fit his image. That grandfather died alone in a nursing home. Merrick didn't attend the funeral." Her eyes filled. "I told myself my son would change. He hasn't. He's getting worse." I asked the only question that mattered. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because your grandson deserves better," she said. "And because you deserve the truth." Then she told me what happened after I left the restaurant. Once the service stopped, guests began leaving. Confusion turned into whispers, and Ethan noticed. "He kept asking where you were," she said. "He watched the door. When Kimberly finally told him you weren't coming, he climbed onto a chair." I closed my eyes. "He said, 'This isn't a real birthday without Grandpa Gregory.' He pushed his cake away, refused the candles, cried so hard they had to take him out. My chest felt like it was splitting open. 'Your grandson stood up for you,' Vanessa whispered, 'in front of everyone.'" She stood to leave, then stopped at the door. "He hid the compass you gave him," she added. "He was afraid it would be thrown away like the drawing." After she left, I sat in the dark for a long time. An 8-year-old had more courage than every adult in that room. If you're still watching, stay with me. Because the next conversation, the one that came days later, was the hardest of my life. 3 days passed before Kimberly came. No calls, no texts, just silence. I didn't chase it. For the first time in years, I let the quiet do its work. On the 4th afternoon, her car pulled into my driveway and sat there longer than necessary. I watched from the kitchen window as she rested her forehead on the steering wheel. That alone told me this wasn't going to be a performance. When she finally knocked, I opened the door before she could do it twice. She looked smaller than I remembered. No makeup, hair pulled back without care. None of the confidence she wore at the restaurant, just exhaustion. "Can I come in, Dad?" she asked. I stepped aside. She didn't make it far. She broke down right there in the living room, sobbing the way children do when they're past trying to look composed. Every instinct in me wanted to pull her clothes, to fix it, to tell her it was okay. I didn't. I let her cry. I waited. After a long while, she sat on the floor, back against the couch, eyes red and swollen. I sat across from her, not beside her. The space mattered. "I don't know how this happened," she whispered. "It started small. Merrick said things made sense at first. networking, appearances. What was best for Ethan's future? She swallowed hard. Then it turned into you. I said nothing. He said your house was embarrassing, that Ethan needed higher expectations, that you didn't fit into the life he was building. Her voice cracked. And I didn't fight hard enough. You chose him, I said quietly. She nodded. He told me if I invited you, he'd file for divorce and fight for full custody. He said I'd lose. That landed heavy. Fear explained a lot. It didn't erase anything. So you chose to lose me instead, I said. She didn't argue, she just cried harder. I thought I could manage it, she said, that it was temporary, that you'd forgive me like you always do. That hurt more than the party. I told her I loved her because I do, but love doesn't cancel consequences. It doesn't undo damage, and it doesn't mean I keep accepting less than respect. She looked up at me desperate. What do? I took a breath. We change how this works. I told her there would be conditions, not punishments, boundaries. Ethan would spend time with me every week, just him and me. No excuses. Family counseling, not someday, not maybe. Real work and money. She flinched when I said it, not because I needed it, but because she needed to understand that love is not a blank check. If I'm ever erased again, I told her calmly, I walk away, no speeches, no second chances. The room went quiet. I'm 65, I said. I don't have time left to beg for a place in my own family. She nodded, slowly, like she finally understood that something fundamental had changed. Then she said the sentence that broke me. Dad, Ethan thinks you don't love him anymore. That was the moment I cried. Not because of betrayal, not because of money, but because somewhere in this mess, my grandson believed he'd been abandoned. I wiped my face and stood. Call him, I said, right now. Because whatever came next, the most important thing was making sure an 8-year-old knew the truth. Kimberly's hands were shaking when she dialed. She put the phone on speaker and waited. One ring, two. Then Ethan's voice, small and uncertain. Hi, Mom. Hey, buddy, she said, forcing steadiness. Grandpa's here with me. There was a pause, long enough to hurt. Grandpa? He asked quietly. I took the phone. Hey, kiddo, it's me. His breath hitched. I thought you didn't want to come. That sentence cut deeper than anything that had happened at the restaurant. Oh no, I said, keeping my voice calm even though my chest was tight. I wanted to come more than anything. Nothing on this earth would keep me away from you. Another pause. Then softer, even if I messed up. You didn't mess up at all, I told him. Grown-ups did, and we're fixing it. He didn't say anything for a second, then I heard it, a sniffle. I hid the compass, he whispered. So Dad wouldn't throw it away. My eyes closed. You never have to hide that again, I said. That compass points home, and you're always home with me. When the call ended, the room was quiet in a different way, not heavy, honest. 8 months passed after that day. They weren't easy months. There were therapy sessions where no one spoke for 10 minutes. There were Thursdays Ethan watched me closely, like he was waiting to see if I'd disappear again. I didn't, not once. We baked cookies, built birdhouses, sat in the garage sanding wood while the radio played old songs. One afternoon he hugged me and whispered, I missed you so much, Grandpa. I had to turn away so he wouldn't see my eyes. Kimberly changed too, slowly. She got a part-time job, paid me back every month without being reminded, not because of the money but because it mattered that she did what she said she would. Merrick went to therapy. I saw him rarely. Polite. Careful, not trusted, but trying. Sometimes trying is the first step. Then Ethan's 9th birthday came. He didn't want a restaurant, didn't want balloons brushing a ceiling. He wanted my house, my garage, 10 people instead of 80. Because you're here, he said, that's what makes it real. We taped a hand-drawn banner to the wall, ate pizza, laughed. Vanessa brought a simple cake. When Ethan blew out the candles, he looked straight at me and smiled like nothing else in the room existed. Later that night, after everyone left, he held up the compass. "It still works," he said. "So do we," I told him. I used to believe love meant giving until there was nothing left. I was wrong. Love also means knowing your worth and teaching others how to treat you. If you're watching this and you felt invisible, pushed aside, or erased by the people you gave everything to, hear me clearly. You are not too much. You are not outdated. You are not expendable. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is draw a line and stand behind it. If this story meant something to you, tell me in the comments what part hit home. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to hear more stories like this, you're welcome to stay. I'm glad you were here.